Chapter 1. The Arrival. The mountain loomed like a jagged tooth against the dull gray sky, its black summit lost in a shroud of restless clouds. Below, the forest stretched endlessly, an ancient sea of twisted pines and choking underbrush that whispered old secrets in the biting wind. The land was swallowed by a creeping winter chill, the kind that gnawed at bone and spirit alike. 5 figures trudged through the thin snow, their breath a mist before faces hardened by months of war and wandering. The air was brittle, each step toward the summit a small defiance against the cold and the silence. Gunnar, their leader, was the first to reach the heavy wooden gates of the fortress known only as Hrafnjall, the Raven Mountain. His eyes, sharp and gray like flint, scanned the towering stone walls, streaked with frost and age. The fortress was a bleak thing, built with dark granite blocks quarried from the mountain itself, weathered by countless storms. Behind him came Sven, the youngest, clutching his spear like a lifeline, cheeks flushed red from the cold and nerves. Hakon, tall and silent as a shadow, trailed close, his dark eyes observing everything. Eirik muttered quietly to himself, crossing himself with trembling fingers, while Bjorn, the cynic of the group, scoffed and spat into the snow. Stone and silence. Bjorn muttered, voice low and bitter. Not the kind of place a man wants to find himself in. Gunnar did not reply. His duty was clear. They had been sent to guard a prisoner. No name, no cause, only that the man was dangerous and kept within the deepest cell of the keep. Orders from the chieftain. Keep watch until relief came or the prisoner was moved. No questions asked. The gates creaked open, a sound like a sigh from the fortress itself, revealing the blackness within. The guard stepped into the cold heart of Hrafnjall, the air thick with the scent of damp stone and old smoke. The prisoner's cell lay beneath layers of iron and stone, far from any warmth or light. It was a small chamber, bare save for the cold bed of straw and iron shackles bolted into the walls. The figure inside sat slumped, wrapped in ragged linen, face obscured in shadow. For all his danger, the man said nothing. His eyes, when glimpsed, were dark pools reflecting nothing. Days passed in grim monotony. The guards took turns at watch, their senses sharpened yet dulled by the oppressive silence. Each night brought strange noises, the scrape of stone, whispers just beyond hearing, and fleeting shadows flickering like smoke. Sven shivered by the fire one night, glancing toward the prisoner's cell as if expecting the darkness to swallow him whole. "Do you think he's cursed?" he whispered to Eirik. The older man crossed himself again, voice trembling. "The old gods watch from the forest, lad. This place, it is not blessed. Keep your prayers close." Gunnar paced the cold stone floor, struggling to hold the men's nerves in check. But he too felt it, a creeping unease, a presence that slithered beneath the walls and froze the blood. One night, Bjorn swore he saw the prisoner's eyes flash with a terrible light. Another, Hakon claimed the cell door breathed, slow and heavy as a beast. The cold tightened its grip. The mountain watched, waiting. And somewhere in the dark, the prisoner waited too. Chapter 2. The Prisoner's Silence. The days lengthened, but the darkness never truly fled Hrafnjall. A heavy fog clung to the mountain like a shroud, swirling through the battlements and curling beneath the eaves. The sun was a pale memory, smothered behind layers of cold gray clouds. Within the fortress, time seemed to slow and warp. The guards moved like ghosts, faces drawn, voices low, eyes hollow. The prisoner remained as he was on their arrival, still, silent, unmoving. No word, no gesture, no sign of life beyond the steady rise and fall of his chest. It was a silence that grew heavy, suffocating. Gunnar watched his men with a tight jaw. The cold was physical now, gnawing at them from inside out. Sven, once eager and wide-eyed, sat huddled by the fire, staring at the flickering shadows on the stone walls. His fingers trembled as he gripped his spear. "I dreamed of him again last night," he confessed one morning, voice barely audible. His eyes, they weren't empty. They were hungry, like he saw right into me. Eirik nodded solemnly. The old prayers, they say such beings hunger not for flesh alone, but for the soul. Hakon said nothing, but Gunnar caught him watching the cell door with an intensity that chilled the bone. Bjorn, who once mocked these superstitions, had fallen silent, a dark storm gathering behind his eyes. Each night, the strange sounds grew bolder. Whispered voices curled along the stone corridors, calling names. Sometimes Sven's, sometimes Gunnar's. Shadows flickered where no light should reach, twisting and writhing like living things. One evening, Gunnar found strange carvings etched deep into the heavy oak door of the prisoner's cell. Rune-like symbols, unfamiliar and jagged, scarred the wood. He traced them with a rough finger, a cold shiver running down his spine. "They're not ours," Gunnar muttered. "Some old magic, forgotten or cursed." Eirik stepped closer, voice shaking. "Runes a binding, words to hold something back, or to keep something in," Bjorn added grimly. Tension cracked the air. The men circled each other like wary beasts, suspicion gnawing at their bonds. Gunnar knew this was no ordinary prisoner. Something ancient and terrible lay beneath the silence. That night, a cold wind blew through the fortress, carrying with it a scent of rot and iron. The prisoner shifted in his shackles, and for a fleeting moment, Gunnar swore he saw a smile flicker across a pale, gaunt face. The walls of Hrafnfjall seemed to close in, the silence deepening into a living thing that fed on their fear. And somewhere deep in the darkness, the prisoner watched. Chapter 3, The Cold Within. Winter tightened its grip on Hrafnfjall, wrapping the mountain in a relentless storm. The wind howled like a beast starved for blood, tearing at the fortress walls and rattling the gates. Snow piled thick and heavy, sealing the guards in a frozen cage. Inside, the cold was not merely a thing of ice and frost. It seeped into their bones, stealing warmth and hope alike. The fire in the hearth flickered weakly, casting long, twisting shadows that danced like wraiths upon the stone. The guards huddled close, faces pale and drawn. Gunnar's breath came in shallow gasps beneath his fur cloak. Even Hakon, ever the stoic, rubbed his hands against the rough wool of his tunic, fingers numb and trembling. Sven's dreams grew darker. Night after night, the prisoner's face haunted him. Eyes flickering from hollow pits to burning coals, mouth twisting into a grotesque grin. The youth woke with screams strangled in his throat, sweat freezing on his skin. Bjorn's laughter had died away, replaced by silence as heavy as the snow outside. He spoke less, and when he did, it was in bitter whispers that frayed nerves and old wounds. "Cold," Eirik said one evening, voice low, voice cracking. "Not just winter's bite. It comes from within, from a mountain, from the stone." Gunnar stared at the prisoner's cell through the darkness. The man had not moved for days, yet Gunnar felt the gaze of unseen eyes upon him. The cell door, scarred by ancient runes, seemed to pulse, slow, heavy, as if it breathed beneath the chill. A sudden clatter echoed through the hall. Gunnar spun toward the sound. Hakon stood near the cell, hands pressed flat against the stone, lips moving in silent prayer or madness. "Hakon," Gunnar called, voice strained. The guard did not turn. His eyes were glazed, distant. "They hunger," Hakon whispered. "The mountain, it hungers." Bjorn stepped forward, voice bitter. "Hunger for what? Flesh? Soul? God's mercy?" Sven shivered, his eyes wide. "I saw it, a shape moving outside the window. Not man, not beast." Eirik crossed himself, chanting prayers in the old tongue. "The mountain watches. The mountain waits." The prisoner's cell door creaked. A slow, deliberate sound, like the breathing of a great beast. Gunnar's heart thundered as he approached. The man inside remained still, eyes closed, until the moment they snapped open, glowing faintly in the dark. A voice, cold and terrible, whispered through the fortress halls, a sound like ice cracking over a frozen lake. "Watchers all," it said, "bound by fear, bound by cold. You will break, as all break here." The guards exchanged fearful glances. Madness was no longer a distant threat. It had begun to creep beneath their skin, as inexorable as the winter cold. The mountain waited. The prisoner watched, and the cold within grew. Chapter 4. Voices in the Stone. The days blurred into a shifting haze of cold and shadows. The fortress, already a cage of stone and ice, now seemed alive, breathing, whispering, watching. The guards' minds frayed like worn rope, each thread unraveling under the weight of dread. Voices drifted through the corridors at night, soft and sibilant, calling their names with voices both familiar and alien. Gunnar, sitting alone by the dying embers of the fire, heard his name whispered so clearly it cut through the silence like a blade. Sven, Hacken, Gunnar. At first, the men resisted the temptation to answer, clinging to their last shreds of reason. But the voices grew bolder, more insistent. One night, Hacken vanished. They found him at dawn, crouched by the prisoner's cell, lips moving in a tongue no one recognized. His eyes were wide and unseeing, body trembling. "They speak," he said, voice hollow. "The stone knows. It hungers." Eirik's prayers grew frantic. The old gods called on with desperation and fear. He claimed the fortress itself was alive, a beast born of rock and frost, feeding on their fear and silence. Tensions boiled over. Bjorn, ever the skeptic, accused Gunnar of hiding truths about the prisoner. "You've been too close to that cell. What has he told you? What did you see in those eyes?" Gunnar's calm snapped. The men's faces twisted with paranoia. Friend and foe blurred beneath the weight of suspicion. Bjorn lashed out in a sudden, violent fury, striking at Gunnar with a rusted blade found in the armory. The guards pulled him back, but the damage was done. The fortress echoed with shouts and curses, but beneath it all lay the whispering stone, unmoved and patient. Through the chaos, the prisoner remained silent, watching, waiting. Chapter 5. Fracture Minds. The cold pressed deeper. It was no longer a thing outside them, but something that lived beneath their skin, a creeping frost that gnawed at sanity. Each guard was haunted by dreams, nightmares etched in shadow and fire. Sven saw himself drowning in a black lake, the prisoner's eyes glowing beneath the surface. Bjorn's visions twisted into grotesque parodies of the men he once called brothers, their faces melting into monstrous masks. Gunnar paced the halls, trying to hold himself together. The cell door seemed to pulse in the flickering firelight, warping and breathing like a living thing. The runes carved into the wood glowed faintly, ancient and terrible. Hacken refused to leave the cell side, whispering prayers lost to time, his eyes locked on the prisoner as if drawn by a force beyond reason. "Can you hear it?" Sven whispered one night, voice shaking. "It's speaking to me through the shadows." Gunnar's throat tightened. Trust was gone. They were all unraveling, threads caught in a storm they could not name. The fortress had become a labyrinth not just of stone and cold, but of the mind, fracturing and reshaping with every whispered word and flickering shadow. Outside, the mountain waited, patient and eternal. Inside, they were lost. Chapter 6. The Breaking. The fortress had become a tomb. One by one, the guards vanished. First, it was Eirik. They found no trace of him after the night watch. Only his prayers scrawled in desperate runes across the walls of the prisoner's cell. The old man was gone, swallowed by shadows or madness. No one could tell which. Bjorn was next. He was discovered crouched in the armory, eyes wild and unseeing, fingers trembling as he scratched rune after rune into the stone. When Gunnar tried to speak with him, Bjorn only laughed, a dry, hollow sound, and muttered, "They're coming." They watched through the stone. Sven's fear twisted into suspicion. "You're hiding something, Gunnar. You've been too close to that prisoner. What did you learn in the dark?" Gunnar's grip on reason faltered. The line between guard and prisoner blurred as paranoia strangled his thoughts. The prisoner laughed once, a sound like ice cracking underfoot. The fortress itself seemed to breathe, stone shifting imperceptibly, closing in. The mountain waited. The watchers were no more. Chapter 7. The Prisoner's Truth. Gunnar stood alone, broken and hollow, his breath ragged in the frigid air of the fortress's depths. The cold gnawed at him, but it was the darkness inside, within these walls and within his mind, that threatened to consume him. Before him, the prisoner sat in shadow, no longer silent. His voice was a cold wind, ancient and terrible. "I am no mere man," he said, eyes gleaming like frozen stars. "Bound by old rites, by curses older than your gods. This fortress was built not to hold a man, but a horror, the raven that feeds on fear and flesh alike." Gunnar's vision swam with ghosts of the past, images of bloodied sacrifices, broken oaths, and a mountain that drank deep of the soul's acclaimed. "You were never meant to guard me," the prisoner whispered, voice echoing in Gunnar's skull. "You were meant to break, and so you have." Desperation clawed at Gunnar's heart. He reached for the ancient runes, hoping to undo what had been wrought, but the mountain's hunger was relentless. Madness and reality twisted into one. The prisoner's laughter echoed like a death knell. Gunnar understood at last. He was both prisoner and guard, lost to the mountain's endless cold. Chapter 8, The Last Watch. The fortress lay silent. Snow drifted heavy against stone walls, muffling footsteps that no longer came. Gunnar's mind shattered, a fractured prism of memories and nightmares. He wandered the endless halls, a ghost trapped between waking and dreaming, guard and prisoner intertwined. Shadows moved at the edges of vision. Flickers of faces long gone, whispers curling like smoke. Outside, the mountain stood eternal, cold, patient, insatiable. A new group of guards approached, their faces pale with hope and fear. They crossed the threshold, unaware. The Watcher's curse was waiting. The mountain's hunger would never end.